man's rigid integrity, his stubborn adherence to principle made him a legendary figure in American politics. Both his friends and enemies agreed that his character was marked by one distinguishing quality. They said, it has never occurred to him that there is such a thing as the easy way out. His name is Robert Taft, and this is his biography. I'm Mike Wallace. This is Biography. Our story, Robert Taft. Senator Robert Taft was one of the great leaders of the Republican Party. He was a powerful senator. He wielded great influence in the affairs of his party and his nation. But the very qualities that distinguished him as a senator prevented him from realizing his greatest ambition, to follow in the footsteps of his father, William Howard Taft, 27th President of the United States. 1909, a new Republican president occupies the White House. An affable, warm-hearted walrus of a man known to a fond public as Bill. William Howard Taft is the perfect symbol of a period historians call the innocent years. It is a buoyant, optimistic age, which sees Americans shrugging off staid Victorian manners and enjoying life with carefree innocence. Mass production seems to promise a new era of ease and economic prosperity. In the spirit of his time, President Taft promotes optimism and political harmony. During his first months in office, the most notable news from Washington concerns the president's gargantuan appetite. He has a 12-ounce steak and a half-dozen eggs for breakfast. The president is applauded as an ideal father. He delights in taking weekend picnic expeditions in the first presidential automobile. Taft's eldest son, Robert, is studious, reserved, sensitive. He is deeply disturbed when a bitter political controversy engulfs his father. Taft had been virtually handed the presidency by his popular predecessor, the dynamic Teddy Roosevelt. But now, as Taft's first term draws to a close, Roosevelt launches a savage attack on his protege. Taft was all right under me, Roosevelt says. But now he is yielded to his wife, incompetent advisors, and his brother Charlie. Taft, anxious to avoid conflict, at first refuses to answer Roosevelt's charges. But finally, reluctantly, he is drawn into a savage, mudslinging contest for the 1912 Republican nomination. The election campaign is a protracted ordeal for Taft. The disastrous split with Teddy Roosevelt has cost him any chance of being re-elected. Woodrow Wilson exploits the break in Republican ranks to become the first Democratic president in 18 years. As he leaves the White House, William Howard Taft is a heartbroken man. Many blame him for the fatal split in the Republican Party. I'm a man of peace, he says sadly. I didn't want to fight. Now there are so many people who won't like me. Robert provides one of the few bright spots for his father. He graduates from Yale Law School, #1 in his class. One with a family name, Robert remarks earnestly, has a lot to live up to. Robert Taft returns to Cincinnati, where his family is prominent and powerful. Here he practices law and works hard in Ohio politics. 1927. The Taft family gathers for a summer vacation in Canada. Now Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, The aging William Howard Taft relishes these moments with his children and grandchildren. He takes special pride in Robert, who has become a Republican leader in the Ohio legislature. In everything he does, Bob Taft displays dogged determination and a competitive spirit. Friends say that Taft can never forget the time when his father was called too easygoing, too indecisive to be president. 1930. At 71, William Howard Taft suddenly is stricken by a heart attack. Within days, he is dead. Even as his nation mourns William Howard Taft, it seems apparent that history will regard him as a comparatively undistinguished, although sympathetic figure. Will Rogers pays him a telling tribute. It's great to be great, Will says, but it's greater to be human. Robert Taft, though he has little of his father's personal warmth, has proved he is an effective political campaigner. In the 1938 election, he wins a seat as the United States Senator from Ohio. In Washington, his wife Martha serves as his tireless chief assistant. Taft wastes no time in lashing out at what he calls New Deal inefficiency and what he considers Franklin Roosevelt's near dictatorial power. Even now, Taft feels that his political principles are more important than being popular with his fellow senators. June 1940. The Republicans meet in Chicago to pick their presidential candidate. Surprised political analysts find that an intense grassroots campaign has made freshman Senator Robert Taft a leading contender for the nomination. On the first ballot, Taft and New York's Governor Thomas Dewey are deadlocked. Then, on the sixth ballot, the convention settles for a compromise candidate. Wendell Willkie, a relatively unknown Midwesterner, surges to victory. With exasperating suddenness, the nomination has slipped from Robert Taft's grasp. Returning to Washington, Taft takes his defeat in stride. He knows that someday he will get another chance at the nomination. And more important, he has emerged as a major power in the Republican Party. Taft becomes a familiar figure to the nation, harrying Roosevelt with what one reporter describes as bleak but savage clarity.
The president has deigned to offer me a handsome prize if I could tell him how to balance this budget in 2 years. The budget can be balanced under the leadership of a determined executive. The way to balance the budget is to stop spending government money, tear up the old budget, and begin at the beginning again.
During World War II, when the Congress gives the president extraordinary powers, Taft voices vigorous objections. He speaks out even though advisors tell him he will be considered unpatriotic. But Taft will be involved in an even more violent controversy. In 1946, with wartime restrictions lifted, organized labor stages major strikes in steel, coal, and transportation. More than 3 million workers are on strike, all but paralyzing the nation. Robert Taft becomes chairman of a committee assigned to draft a new labor law. Taft says he will seek an effective compromise between the interests of labor and management. He finally proposes a law which would give the government tighter rein on the unions. And Taft pushes the Taft-Hartley bill through Congress, despite the opposition of the president and the entire labor movement.
The campaign carried on against the bill by the labor unions has been a complete tissue of falsification to support the contention of 10 years that unions are above criticism and above the law, that there must be no legislation on the pain of political execution.
While a national controversy rages, the Taft-Hartley bill goes to the White House for the president's signature. Harry Truman vetoes the bill, but within days, the House and Senate overrule it. Taft is in a high mood, a reporter writes. He is hitting a great blow at the New Deal, reaching for what he considers the jugular vein of its power, the Union. 1948. Robert Taft's ultimate goal is within sight. He organizes his campaign for the Republican presidential nomination. He plans with military thoroughness, even though he is considered a sure winner. Mrs. Taft is already getting the national attention due a prospective First Lady.
Taft, do you think that the First Lady of the land should participate in politics, and to what extent?
Well, I'll tell you, I think that the First Lady and all the other ladies should do what is natural to them, what they're interested in, and if they're married, what their husbands like them to do.
Now, Mr. Spivak, Mrs. Taft, you've traveled with the senator across the country as he's spoken recently. What do you think his appeal is to the women of the country today?
Well, I think that his great appeal to the women, as it is to most people, is that they certainly think they can trust him. I think they're right on that. I know that I can trust him. And he has that quality, you know, which is sometimes considered a political drawback. The quality of saying what he thinks, meaning what he says, and keeping his promises.
I think there's a very good prospect of winning. In fact, I think the race is largely between Mr. Dewey and myself, and I think that I have the better chance of winning.
A reporter writes, Taft has the air of one whose honest labors are about to be crowned with deserved success. June 22nd, 1948. The Republican National Convention begins in Philadelphia with the usual flourishes and fanfare.
To give to you for your vote, in confidence of great service, my senior colleague in the Senate, the Honorable Robert A. Taft of Ohio.
Delegates must choose between two contenders, Robert Taft and Thomas Dewey. Dewey has already lost to Roosevelt in '44, and he can't match Taft's experience and knowledge of politics on the national level. Yet from the first ballot, Dewey leads, and by the third, it's all over. There's one delegate. Taft didn't look like a winner, but Dewey does. Has been defeated by his party's lingering fear that he's too uncompromising as a candidate and too colorless as a personality. Disappointed and dazed, Robert Taft tries to figure out what went wrong. What is an election anyway, he demands? Some kind of motion picture popularity contest? After his defeat, Taft's prestige plummets. He becomes bitter, difficult. He loses many political supporters. It is rumored in Washington by 1950 that Taft won't even be able to hold his Senate seat in the coming election. A union leader has told Taft, "We're going into Ohio, and believe me, there's nothing we won't do to knock you out of the Senate and keep you out." Taft invades Union strongholds. His approach is unpretentious, direct, defiantly unglamorous. He is determined to win the election in his own way or not at all. As the underdog fighting a determined battle, he has earned the respect and sympathy of Ohio's voters. When the returns are in, Taft learns that he has won his fight. He is elected by an astounding margin of more than 430,000 votes. Taft's spirit this, his optimism instantly rebounds. He returns to Washington in triumph. Once again, he is Mr. Republican. Party regulars now take a new view of Taft. If he can beat heavy odds in Ohio, perhaps he'd be a winning presidential candidate after all. With another presidential race on the horizon, Taft needs little convincing.
I'm going to run because I believe I can conduct the only kind of campaign which will elect a Republican to office. I believe we can extend to the entire nation the methods which we used in Ohio. I feel confident, therefore, that I will be nominated and elected.
Running for the 52 nomination, Taft is now willing to endure almost anything to acquire the kind of public image that is said to win elections. He shakes thousands of hands, and he even learns to display an automatic smile. Taft poses for endless sentimental photographs with his family. But his friends know that he suffers keen embarrassment, that he deeply resents this invasion of his personal life. But Taft's speeches stay the same. He still prefers facts to oratory. Doggedly, he drives home the theme of Republican principles.
Same issue in this country, which is the great issue in the entire world, is the issue between the constant growth of a totalitarian state, the constant enlargement of the power of Washington bureaus to regulate the detailed lives of every person in the United States, on the one hand, and on the other, the Republican principle of individual freedom. And I feel very strongly myself that no nation as big as the United States can be free if all the power is centered in a Washington bureau.
Dwight Eisenhower opposes Taft for the nomination. Although he is a dark horse candidate, Ike's easy charm and personal magnetism bring him a groundswell of popular support. July 1952. The Republicans meet in Chicago. Taft arrives with 530 committed votes. He needs only 604 to win.
The Republicans, by putting on a strong campaign, by campaign of determined organization of all of those enthusiastic forces determined to return America to the Americans, is going in 1952 to win finally a victory and restore to Washington those principles which have made this country in the past the greatest and most powerful and the happiest people in the world today.
He is completely confident. It is inconceivable to him that Eisenhower, a novice with only a hazy political program, can win the nomination. As the first ballot is taken, an uneasy murmur sweeps through the Taft camp. Last-minute vote changes are giving the edge to Eisenhower. After the first ballot, Eisenhower's total is 595 votes. He needs only 9 more to win.
Mr. Chairman, Minnesota wishes to change its vote to Eisenhower.
Then, suddenly, delegations are competing to be the first to switch to Eisenhower, to cast the deciding ballot. In clamorous confusion, the Republican Party gives its final, deafening, heart-breaking answer to Robert Taft.
General Eisenhower is hereby nominated by the Republican Party as his candidate for President of the United States.
Taft is shocked and incredulous. With just a few months of casual campaigning, with a hasty declaration of party loyalty, General Eisenhower has been handed the prize that years of devoted service could not win for Taft. This is the bitterest moment of Robert Taft's life. Now, Taft is overwhelmed by anger. His lifetime of party loyalty seems valueless. wasted. He issues an emotional ultimatum. Unless Ike endorses his Republican principles, Robert Taft will become a renegade and refuse to support Eisenhower in the presidential campaign. In an effort to win Taft's support, Eisenhower invites the senator to New York. Almost a half-century ago, this kind of meeting between Taft's father and Teddy Roosevelt produced a disastrous split in the Republican Party. Now, reporters wait for news of compromise or open warfare. After a 2-hour session, Ike and Taft make a show of unity. Taft becomes a vigorous and effective campaigner for Eisenhower. His anger and disappointment seem to have vanished. Writes the political commentator, in the end, a sense of his duty to his party and the public rules Bob Taft.
I appeal to every American to join in restoring to Washington a government based on American principles of honesty, efficiency, economy, and above all, liberty, by the election of two men who are imbued with those principles, Dwight Eisenhower and Dick Nixon.
January 3rd, 1953. Senators and congressmen gather to greet the new President of the United States. Here, before the men he has lived and worked with, Robert Taft sees the beginning of the Republican administration he had dreamed of leading all his life. One senator says, "I hope Bob knows how much of our applause is directed at him." During the first months of the Eisenhower administration, Ike and Robert Taft draw closer. The president has the power. Taft has the knowledge to make the new administration a success. Then, on April 20th, 1953, Taft is Ike's guest at Augusta, Georgia. After playing 6 holes of golf, he feels a sudden sharp pain in his hip. Later, he will consult a doctor and receive a diagnosis of malignant and incurable cancer. Taft, however, refuses to disclose the seriousness of his condition to the public. In the last months of his life, he is determined to preserve his privacy. But by July, the world is waiting when the inevitable announcement comes. Senator Robert Taft